Hello, welcome to Model Kit Stuff. My name is Jason and welcome to our next episode in the build of the Sherbourne here. So over the next few videos I'm going to be showing you how to get the first planking done on here. We're going to do it as per the instructions, which asks you to put a very simple taper into the planks and shows you how to do that. So we're going to do their method. I'm also going to show you one or two different ways of bending planks as we go. And I'm going to emulate some of the issues that people doing this for the very first time often come against. So I will be making some deliberate errors that I know are common mistakes, things that I did when I first started building wooden model ships, so that I can then explain why that's happened, how to avoid it, and critically, if you have done that yourself, how to replicate it. Because this is the point where a lot of people can come unstuck if they're not careful, and they walk away from the kits and there is nothing you do that isn't salvageable. So ultimately you can steam this under a kettle and that softens the wood glue, and you can take the whole thing apart and start again if you really want to, but you're not going to need to. I'm going to take you through it step by step, like I say. Anything that at the end of it is a problem, I'm going to show you how to fix it. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through one side of the hull. Every single plank that we put down, I will show you what I've done and how I've got there, so you can get to this. And then the other side of the hull I will do off camera, just to save time for you guys. So yeah, we are ready to start planking the hull. Enjoy, take your time. Make sure things fit nicely, and you shouldn't really have a problem. Right, we're at the part where a lot of people sort of, I think, panic and think, oh, I'm not sure I can do this. But all you've got to do is take your time and be methodical, and you'll soon get into the swing of it. So all of these planks, according to the instructions, will need to be tapered. And by tapering, what we mean is we're going to have to put some shape into certainly the bow, possibly the stern, but we will see. So what we'll be doing is dry fitting, measuring, cutting, then final fit, which will include gluing them in. So that's the general process. We're going to use the pins provided with the kit. These are good quality pins with a nice small head, which goes into my pin pusher really well. Doesn't matter which type of pin pusher you have, there's lots of different types about. I just happen to like this one. It's handy. I don't think they make these anymore, but you need some way, flat nose pliers or something like that, way so that you can pull the nails out. These I think were made for model railway people that nailed the tracks down, and it allows you to pull that out. You're going to need a rule for drawing. You're going to need a good sharp knife for cutting, and you're going to need a good pencil as well. And that's pretty much all you're going to need until you need to put some adhesive on. So the instructions tell us that we've got roughly 12 of these planks to install on each side, so 24 in total. In my bundle I've got 4 extras, but we'll do our best not to use them. Yeah, so what we're going to do in the first instance is we're just going to put the plank and butt it up to the edge there like so. So we just butt it up to the edge, put our finger on it, and work the plank round, and I always think it's a good way of referencing is to mark the center of the plank along this line here with a point on the top. So if I just zoom you in a little bit, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm marking that point roughly in the middle of the bulkhead there. So when I come to put the plank back on, I know exactly where I'm putting it. So to work out our taper, what we want to do is just fix this into position. So we'll get our nail pusher, line it up there, and we want to put it in the middle of the nail in the middle of the plank and the middle of the bulkhead, pretty much. There we go. Now when we come to glue this down, we'll put a nail in each one of these bulkheads, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, we're just going to put probably about 3, maybe 4 pins in. Drove that one in a little bit too far, not to worry. Keep it nice and tight against that pattern that we put in above. There we go. The reason why we're nailing this in dry like this is so that we can hold it into place the way we're going to put the plank in when we glue it down. Okay, so we can see that we can glue that all the way along, and we're not going to have any real issues with a need for taper on this first one at the stern. So we know that's good. Here we can see that the plank is going to want to cross over the top of the bow, and that's what the point we've got to find. So we're just letting it naturally fall, and when it's about to cross over the top, we're going to mark that. So when the plank naturally wants to fall above it, we're gonna, there we go, we're gonna mark that point there. And we've got to understand roughly how much of the plank. So you never want to taper it more than half the depth of the plank, because it weakens the plank. So what we've done is we've marked the point where it crosses over and the halfway point, and we know exactly where we're going to put that plank when we put it back on. So we can now remove the plank. So we'll remove the nails. If you've, like me, driven a nail a little bit too deep, you can just prise it out with your blade. There we go. Okay, so we've now got the plank marked off, so the next thing we need to do is to cut the taper. So a little tip here is to get 2 or 3 planks lying flat on the surface below the plank that you want to cut. And the reason we do that is it'll just help stop the rule rocking when you put it down. So we're going to our taper point and our halfway mark, and just so you can see it on camera, that's how much we're going to take off. So I'm putting the rule back on because we're going to use it as a guide for the knife. Now the instructions tell you to soak the plank so that the blade of the knife isn't guided by the wood grain. You can certainly do that, but I find if you go over it and don't press and just go over it lightly, keeping the blade nice and tight to your rule, that you'll just groove a little line in, and then the blade will want to just follow that anyway naturally. So you can see I'm just doing a number of gentle passes. There you go, and we've got a nice sharp edge. But by all means soak the plank if that's what you want to do, and actually a wet plank will glue on, particularly if you're using super glue, easier. Don't throw these away, you never know, they might be handy for filling gaps later on. We're going to try not to get gaps, but you never know. Right, so we can now hold that back against our bulkhead and put that in like so. Don't worry if you've got a bit of a gap, because it really doesn't matter, because this is just the first planking. So that's not so bad. Now what I like to do is, I find that when you cut a taper in, there's always a bit of a sharp edge. So what I like to do is just go in with a file and extend it out a little bit. So, and just smooth that lump down and make sure it's nice and straight. Now you can do that with a spoke shaver, or you can do it with a mini plane. I just like to sand it. I think that just works for me. There we go. That should be fairly nice and tight. So the reason why we don't cut more than halfway is so we've still got a surface area for putting the nail in. Now the strip of wood naturally wants to spring back. It doesn't like the fact that you're wanting to shape it, but we can take some of that spring out, and that makes it a little bit easier. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to hold it over boiling water from the kettle, and just put a bit of a bend in so that we lose some of the springiness out of the wood. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate to you how to put a curve into your wooden strip using steam from the kettle. So first of all, we get the kettle boiling. Don't put too much water in, otherwise you stood there for longer. Gonna hold it at one end, because obviously what we're about to do is hot. And what we'll do when it starts to steam is we'll just bend it, and the steam, the heat and the moisture will get into the wood, and the wood will remember that shape and will stay there. So you can see we've now got a curve in there. That's going to really help with forming our shape when we go round the bow. And the advantage of doing this is our wood is dry, so we're not going to have the issues that a wet strip of wood can have when you put a nail through it. Makes it harder for the wood to stay in place, and we're not going to have the issues that you have trying to sand a wet strip. So I much prefer doing this than soaking a strip, but if you prefer soaking a strip, that's perfectly fine also. But yeah, I've used this method now for quite some time, and I swear by it. So with our plank slightly shaped to help us, and we know that everything's going to fit okay, we can now glue this into place. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put a small amount of glue on each one of our bulkhead contact points here, right up against the pattern there where we want this plank to be butting as tightly as we can up there. But don't worry if it's not perfect, because this is just the first planking. Okay, so with our glue in place, we can start our process of nailing by lining up our pencil point. Jumper tangled on it. There we go, first nail in. Now we do want to put a nail on every bulkhead this time. So I'm just pushing the plank against the pattern with my thumb there, just to make sure it's nice and firmly buttered against that. There we go. It doesn't matter if we've got glue oozing out, we can clean that up afterwards. Oh, I think my nail dropped out and I didn't notice. Slipped. Oh, I'm a bit far away on that one. I think I'm gonna reset that one. We have time. It takes a, you know, it's not quick drying glue, so we've got time. If we don't like it, we can take it out and do it again. There we go, nice and tight up there. And there we go. We just keep pushing it up and keep pushing it into place as we go, and making sure it's nice and tight. So just like on the first plank, the second plank's been secured in place with 3 pins so that we can shape this the way we want to. Now I've done an initial taper, but I'm now thinking I haven't taken that far enough back, so just going to have a look. It's a case of constantly sort of manipulating it and seeing how it goes and making sure, you know, you've got it on the planks. So yeah, just there needs a little bit more, and I can probably do that in situ. So we're just going to do a little bit, take a little bit off at a time and keep checking it. I want it to fit really nicely, so take the time, don't rush it, definitely don't do, that'll do. There we go, that's nearly there. I just want to check the length of the plank as well. I think we can just take a bit off that. So I'm using a 220 grit there just to do the final shaping. Yeah, that I think is okay. So let's just take it out. And just like last time, we can go in and so once we've put glue on all the little bulkheads, for extra strength, we're then going to put glue on the underside of the last plank so that any contact between the planks gets strengthened, and that'll just help when we come to sand the first layer of planking and get it all smooth ready for the second. Then, using our pencil mark to line it up, we can put the plank in place and put our first nail in. I always put the first nail in the centre. And then once again a pin in every bulkhead. I think that missed. Keep remembering to push the plank up so it's nice and tight before you drive your nail in. And then it's really important when we clean this up afterwards that we get any glue off the bulkheads or underneath the plank, so that we've got nothing causing the next lot of planks to not butt up properly. So any glue that oozes out we need to remove. There we go. Now the method that I've shown you for bending the plank with steam, you can also use for twisting. So as the planks start going underneath the transom here, it can be helpful to actually put a twist in. It does, we might find when we get lower down, that's something we might want to do. Nearly missed that one. We also might want to put a chamfer in now to stop the planks sticking out and have them fit a little bit more smoothly. We can look at that on the next plank. We might not have to do it, but if we do, it's not a problem. I'm just going to put this chunky clamp on. There we go. That'll just stop that flicking out a little bit. And then we've got to do this bit at the stern here, so let's get that down. Go. I'm just going to put another nail in there just because it's springing back a little bit. Just hold it nice and tight. Okay, that we can leave to dry. I'm just going to make sure we've got no glue on the top. We're not worried about glue here, but you can remove it if you like, but this is all going to get sanded and it'll get removed in that sanding process anyway. So essentially that's what we do now all the way through. What's important is that you do no more than, I'd say, 3. Personally I go for about 2 and then change sides so that you're going down even on all sides. Whilst it's unlikely, given that this is a very short and strong hull construction, there is always the possibility you can put a little bit of a bend in it, especially on much bigger, longer models. So always go down sort of equal on both sides. As a general rule, that tends to be the best way forward. Okay, we're about to do plank 3, and one of the things we can do before we tackle plank 3 is just get these ends out of the way. So I like to use an old side cutter just to remove these. We're not getting them flush at this stage, we'll do that later on. We're just trimming them a bit shorter to get them out of the way. So just being careful that we don't prise the plank off and have to glue it back down. We can just go in and trim it out of the way, and same with this second one. There we go. Keep these bits, you don't know, they might come in handy later on. Okay, so that's just helpful to keep it out of the way. I'll do the others later. We'll just keep concentrating on this one side for you. So I'm going to show you a slightly different way of trimming the plank this time. My basic rules are pretty much the same throughout all of this process. So, third plank, we need to find our start point. So butt the plank up against the edge so we know that it's going to reach. If you want, at this stage, you can shape that plank and just put a shape in so that it's going to fit a bit more flush. You can see that's helping with the angle. Another thing that you can do is you can put a little chamfer on the back there. I find that often helps as well with getting things to look like they're sitting nice and tight. So we just follow that round, and if in doubt, make it a bit longer rather than shorter. So I'm just holding it. I'm going to push it back into place and see, does that look like it's going to meet? No. So we'll just lengthen that a bit. There we go. Now we'll mark our center spot again, or our lining up point. And you might be able to see, I'll get the camera in a bit closer, see what you think about this. As I'm holding this against there, you can see that the plank's jutting out a little bit, and it's wanting to kick out because of this curve. So one of the things we can do now to help it sit a little bit better is put a little chamfer on it. So you can do that with something like a fairly coarse sanding stick, or you can do it with a flat file, whichever takes your fancy. I'm going to do it with a sanding stick here, but I often do it with a file. Careful not to bend it, but we'll go the full length, putting a little chamfer on. And you can see we've got this little chamfered edge, and if I put that up there now, you can see how that sits that much flusher. There's less of a step, in fact the step's disappearing. So it just helps with that general fitting, and that will also help with the sanding. So yeah, I'm gonna just put this chamfer in along the full length. There you go, and we can leave that bit at the end because we know the plank's longer. Now, at this stage in the build, what you want to be doing is not rushing it. It's not like, especially if you've come from a different modelling genre, like building plastic tanks or something, where you get a repetitive task like, I don't know, building individual track links or something, and the mindset is very much working through it methodically, and making ground and getting through it as quickly as you can. This is different. You think of this more as craftsmanship, get in a different headspace. You can find 20 minutes, put one on, walk away, do the next one in a couple of hours when you've got a next free spell, or in your lunch break if you're working from home, which is what I do sometimes. You know, just find a moment to do it where you can focus on it, where you can concentrate on it and walk away. There's no rush, this isn't a race, but think about each one as crafting a part of the model. Like the craftsmen that were actually building the real ships, they would take their time, make sure it fit, do a good job. You need to be in the same mindset. So there we go, we've put our chamfer on, and you can see that that's sitting better all the way along. So that's helpful. It's helpful for you while you're trying to find where you're going to be thinning this plank down. So I've lined it up to my line there, and we're just feeling along the bulkheads, and you know, where does this naturally want to fold in? It's a bit, I always find it a little bit difficult to judge, if I'm honest, but you can see here that the plank is naturally wanting to start to overlap. So about there. What you don't want to do is force the plank down or anything like that. You want to keep it going natural, but at the same time we don't want it to stop short. So if you see, you can twist it and the plank will go up before the end. We don't want to do that either. We want the plank to terminate at the prow. So we are pushing it down carefully, and what I sort of suggest is, if you can't calculate how much the width of this should be, firstly, you don't want it to be any thinner than a third of the plank, because then you're risking splitting the plank when you put a nail in. So I'm sort of the opinion that you start at the halfway and thin it more if you need to, or start at 2/3 and thin it more if you need to, and just keep test fitting it. Like I say, it's not a race, just keep trying it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for a third initially. So let's get that drawn on. So just like last time, we'll put some planks down to keep our rule nice and flat and even to the plank. So a third is about there. That might be a bit more than a third, but it doesn't really matter. There we go. And I'm going to draw my line on. Now, rather than running the knife along the edge of the rule, which can be a bit problematic, because what happens is you can't really see what you're doing, and the knife wanders off a little bit, and you know, sometimes it can cause you a problem, is what I'm trying to say. So another way you can do it is sort of plane it, but with a knife, and just pare it away. So let me zoom you in a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. So if we get this lot out of shot so the camera can focus better. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start at the top corner and with our knife just pare it away. So it is just like going over it with a wood plane, but we're just paring down. We've got our drawn line, we don't want to go beyond that, that's okay, but we can take the most of our material out quite quickly doing it this way. And then when you've got it sort of pared down to nearly where you want it to be, get your sanding stick or your sandpaper on a sanding block, and just get that nice and straight and smooth. There you go. And the fact that it was lumpy and bumpy and wavy after pairing is irrelevant, because we sort that out when we sand it, and it's nice and flat now. And then of course we can put our taper back in. There we go. Bear in mind that that is thinning down the back edge of your wood, so for nailing purposes just be mindful of that, because you are making it thinner. And then we can go back to test fitting again. So back to our line. That looks like that's probably going to be okay. So we'll do a dry fit like we've done before, and just nail it into place. So line it up. I almost missed the bulkhead there. Okay, so now we can push that in, see what we think. I think that's almost there. This is going to be a little bit too long, I can tell that already. And we might have to take a little bit off this end here as well. But I don't think we're a million miles away. But we are clearly a little bit too long. So what I'm going to do, just for speed, is I'm just going to trim a little bit off the end, because we're quite a bit over. Test fit again. Yeah, oh, that's much better. I think that will... Now, what you've got to be careful of, that it can look like it's fitting and it's not fitting. So let me bring you in again. You can push this down and from the outside it looks like it's fitting, but if it's slightly too long it'll be sitting slightly further towards the front of the prow than you really want. So it's always important to just look at all the angles and check that the plank is actually sitting on all the contact points as it should do, and that it's nice and it's happy, and you're not forcing it away because the plank's too long. So in this instance I think we are just about spot on there, so I'm happy with the length. So I'm going to bend this under the kettle and then we're ready to fit it. So just take the nails out. Right, you know how I do the steam bending, so I'm going to do that off camera and then I'll come back to you. Right, as we look at the planking going aft, we can see that increasingly it's needing to go underneath the hull. And although it naturally is happy to do that, we are putting a twist in, and that can start prizing out the nail and pulling away from the glue, and it can cause you some problems. So I like to put a little twist in to help take the spring out of the wood and help it to lay flat. So let's find the point where it's twisting. So it's between these bulkheads that we're starting to go under. So if I just mark that with a pencil, about there roughly, what we're going to do is, in the same way as we bent this in the steam, we're going to do the same with this. So we're going to hold it in our mold grips and we're just going to twist the end like so, and that's going to put a little twist in that will help keep that laying flat for us. So I'll do that off camera because you know the principle. I'm just going to hold it like that under the steam till the kettle stops boiling, and it should hold its shape. So I'll be back in a moment to show you what that looks like. So there you go, that's our twist in the wood. It took 2 seconds. And now, as we put that down, that's sitting much more comfortably. It's not fighting back. It's quite happy. So that's really helpful. Anything we can do to help the process is good, and it is so easy to do. And if you're unsure, get two pairs of mold grips and try it with a bit of scrap first. But yeah, it is not difficult, and these are the sort of tips that you never get in the instructions. Okay, so we are now ready to glue this down, and then when we've glued this down, we're going to talk about this area here. So I want to show you what's happening. We don't need to worry about it, but it's a very common thing that happens, and I want to show you how we get away from that. Okay, so I can now glue this down. So we're going to do what we did exactly before. We're going to put glue on every bulkhead. Let's just get rid of that out of the way. And along the bottom of that plank there, to give it plenty of strength, because we are going to be handling this quite and putting pressure on it when we are sanding it, and what we don't want is for our planks to be coming apart, dipping, breaking. And you can see we might be coming into contact with that deck, so we'll put a bit of glue on there as well. It should all be sanded in with the shape of the bulkheads from that sanding process when we were doing our fairing of the hull there. Now you'll notice I've not put glue on there. I'm not expecting the plank to be in contact with that bit. We'll talk about that, like I say, in a moment. So we have our glue on all the way around, so we can start nailing. So just like before, the first nail we're going to do is where we're lining up the plank, like so, making sure that we're pushing that plank against the bulkhead and up against the above plank. Put our first nail in, and this time we're moving out every bulkhead, not skipping a couple. That missed. You know when it misses because it goes in a lot easier. There we go. So you're trying to get it in the middle, but because you're having to sort of, the nail will drop out if you go straight in above it, and you're sort of rolling the nail pusher over to one side. You actually need to start a little bit away from the bulkhead. There we go. And look how flush that is already because of that chamfer we put on. So again, it doesn't mention putting chamfers on in the instructions. They often don't in the instructions. My general thought is that as a rule, the planking of the hull is probably the bit that most people find the most difficult to do or are most scared of, and it's also the bit that is least described in the instructions as a general rule, and it's partly because it's difficult to explain what to do. You know, that's where videos, I think, can make a real difference. Seeing someone do it, understanding it, I think is really helpful, and I hope you are all agreeing. There we go. So I generally work a bit that way, a bit this way, just to make sure that everything's going down nicely. It's a bit like tightening nuts on a wheel. It probably doesn't make any difference, but in my head it might, so that's what I do. And you can see how much more tidy this is compared to the second plank where we didn't put a chamfer in. So if you're doing this, I would very much recommend putting a chamfer in from the second plank onwards. But it doesn't matter because we are going to sand all this into shape anyway. Okay, right, just got some last nails to do at this back end here. Now you probably have got enough nails to leave the nails in all the planks as you go. I've partly taken them out so that they're not in the way of the camera so much and they're not a distraction to what I want you to actually look at. That missed. But also I think they can get in the way, so if the plank's been on for a few hours, you know, these have been on a couple of days before I've come back to this next plank, then just getting them out of the way doesn't do any harm at all. So there we go. That's making nice contact all the way around. You can see it's in full contact. Now this one here, we've got a gap, and it's not necessarily because this is suddenly going in, but this plank here hasn't sat properly when we put it in, and it's not an uncommon thing for that to happen. So it's making contact at the top, and because there's quite a steep curve in, then the plank is flared out. So maybe we could have put a twist in to help fit that. It's possible that the nail has slightly moved out and the springiness of the wood has driven it out, and then it's parted company from the bulkhead. Now it's not a problem. When we come to sand it down, we'll level it up, but we might put a little hole in there. We'll be able to plug that up and fill it. When we come to do the second planking, that won't happen, because what we'll end up with before we put the second planking on is a very smooth, perfectly shaped hull that we're lying against the full length, whereas at the moment we've got these gaps, and this is very much going to form the basis, so it'll be much easier to put the second planking on than the first planking on in many respects. So don't worry if you get something like that. That's why we're keeping these bits, because we can use those to fill any gaps, but also we can use filler as well. We can use wood filler and get it nice and sanded. And a lot of people, when they've done this, they give it a sand, then they go over it with a filler and make it perfectly smooth before they put the next lot of planking in. Now generally I don't put filler in. I tend to like to plug things up with the wood. I think it's stronger using wood and glue. Another thing you can do is collect sawdust, so the dust from sanding and sawing, and mix that with a little bit of wood glue and turn it into a filler. So there's different things you can do, but if you've got something like that, don't worry about it. You can see we've got it a little bit on this side as well, not quite as bad, but we can resolve that, and I'll show you how to resolve it. So we are on, we have just done plank 3. I can go make a coffee, leave that and go and do something else. And when I'm ready and I'm focused and my mind's ready, we can come back and do another one. So like I say, there's no rush. Think of it as crafting the plank. And you know, if you focus on it like one plank is a model in its own right, and you're trying to complete that one little step, you'll do a much better job. So there you go, we are doing okay. I think it's probably important to say at this stage that some of these issues here are caused by the fact that we're using straight planks. If you think about the plank, we're trying to make it go round a curve, and it naturally wants to stay flat in that direction, and we want it to sort of shape itself. So as you get more experience and look into planking, there's an awful lot of more technical planking that you can do. But I'm trying to show you the basics here. I'm trying to show you the things that you will come across as a beginner, and then I can show you how to rectify them as we go as well. But I'm aware that some people will be watching this who are experienced at planking and may want to say, well, you shouldn't do it this way, you shouldn't do it that way. You know, these are things that I know. I'm not necessarily the most skilled at it. I understand the theory better than the practice in some areas, but I'm trying to work with what we've got and show it in a beginner's way. Anyway, there you go. We are going to get these little things and we are going to sort them out. So don't worry about it if you do. There is nothing that can't be sorted. At the end of the day, you're working with wood and there's nothing you can't do with wood. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. It's free. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can hit my PayPal link in the text below. Every pound goes straight into the channel to keep the cameras rolling and to do more fun stuff for you to watch.